Good morning, everyone. It's Anthony Blackburn, and welcome to the latest edition of the Golf in Society podcast. I have the pleasure this morning of being in the company of Katheryn Woolf from a company called Made Open. Now, Katheryn is an absolute expert in service design, and we've been using Made Open and Katheryn's expertise over the last year or so in a major project that we've undertaken at Golf in Society, which was to reimagine golf clubs as health hubs, which was quite an undertaking. So without further ado, I'd like to just say welcome, Katheryn, and thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Anthony. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's been a pleasure working with you. And I really want today for our audience during our chat together to get an understanding of what service design is all about, a little bit of an insight into a real live service design project, which was obviously the one you've worked with us on, which was reimagining golf clubs as health hubs. And then really to finalize it with some maybe tips and advice on fellow social entrepreneurs like me that maybe when they started out on their social mission didn't really understand the importance of service design or co-design or what it's all about, to give them some tips and advice so that they can, like we have now, almost like embed it into their everyday life, their everyday routines, and make sure that it's a practice that they adopt wholeheartedly through the business and the importance of it. So without further ado, let's crack on. And I'll just start by saying the beauty of doing these podcasts is that I'm not an expert in service design or co-design. So I can ask all the stupid questions. So
That's fine. Ask away.
So really what I'd like to start with, Katheryn, is just for you to just give us a little bit of an insight into what service design and co-design is all about.
Okay, so co-design really is, in my view, the process of involving all stakeholders in the design process. So you've got a problem that you want to solve, and it's ensuring that the service or product that you're designing is meeting the needs of the service users. And not just the service users, also the people that are delivering that service to making sure that it's, designing with people, not for people.
And I think that's really important because as we start as social entrepreneurs, we often have a really big ambition as to where we want our social mission to go. And we've got an idea about how many people are going to benefit from our service or our product. And we've got a clear idea as to how we're going to make that happen. But I know from my first days and weeks in the life of a social entrepreneur, I probably didn't involve in the early days my customers in helping me build and design the services. And I suppose I overlooked that. And I think it's really important that other entrepreneurs starting out on their social journeys don't overlook that and make sure that the customer is embedded into everything they do from day one.
Yeah, definitely. I think, with the co-design process, it's really important that you're not only listening to the people that you're working with, but you're empowering them to get involved in solving problems and in making a difference. As part of that co-design process, we need to create the conditions for listening, for learning, and communicating so that we are able to create solutions in a collaborative way. I feel that the process of co-design should enable users of a service to participate and help to solve the problems they face, because as designers, we don't always know the challenges that those end users are facing. So it's really important to understand their journey. And by focusing on the lived experience, we can ensure that people are equal partners in that design process.
Just in your experience, what is the best way to sort of get that customer insight?
So there are lots of components of the co-design process, and I work with the Design Council. I don't know if you're familiar with the Design Council. They have a framework called the Double Diamond, And it's essentially imagine two diamonds. The first part of the first diamond, you're joining together two diamonds, is about discovery. So it's all about, understanding the problems and the challenges service users are facing, before then defining a brief for your solution. And in that, so you're sort of opening up. They call it divergent thinking. So you're opening up the problem, and you're getting people to share. You're engaging the community. You're understanding their journey. You're perhaps making, interviewing. There's lots of different design research methods that I use. So ethnography is one of those, where you're kind of observing people's behaviors, observing how they live their everyday lives, to not just ask what the problem they're facing is, but also to observe it. Because actually sometimes what people say isn't always what they're experiencing. So there's lots of different research methods we'll do in that initial discovery phase of the design process. And then once you've kind of focused in on the key issues and challenges, you can then identify opportunities for improvements in a service, and improvements in innovation, and bring people along that journey. So get people to come up with ideas themselves for solving those challenges. And that's at the center of the two diamonds, is where you define the opportunity for service improvements. And then after that, in the second diamond, it's more about getting people involved in the testing of new solutions. So it's an iterative process where you might try something new in your service delivery, and ask for feedback. If it doesn't work, go back to the drawing board, try something else new, but constantly learn from end users about how they're experiencing your service, so that they can, be involved in that process of collaboration.
I think a perfect example for me in the early days was that I had this idea about doing golf sessions, as you know, and I set off with one customer at one venue. And the first thing that the carer said to me, she said, "Can we please put it back till 10:30? There's no way I can get him here for 9:30. So that to me was just a perfect bit of feedback from the carer as to the starting time for our sessions. So as you can imagine, that was one of the first things that we did. We've now got a red line in terms of the start to a day. So basically, we realised that people have got to get their loved ones ready to get them to the venue and obviously enjoy their day out. And you don't want them under any undue stress having to get that loved one out of the house because they're rushing. So that was a key learning for me, and it's one that's always stuck with me from day one, really.
Yeah, I mean, as a service designer, I see myself very much as a facilitator of the process. So, in effect, we're a guide to listen and to learn, and to kind of we can leverage our expertise of design thinking and use our knowledge of research, but we don't let our own ideas and ambitions drive the outcomes for that service. So, we want the stakeholders who have the knowledge and the experience to guide themselves through a journey of developing better ways of doing things, and prototyping is part of that. So it's about, for me, co-design isn't just about asking them what their experience is, consulting with an end user at the start and then say, thank you very much, we've got that now, we're going to go and create that service. It's about including them in the whole journey all the way through, and sort of it's about discovering their strengths as well and involving them in the solution.
So you mentioned that firstly it's about listening and learning.
Yeah.
It's about identifying the problems and the challenges that potential service users are facing in everyday life at the moment. Then it's about thinking about how might we first start designing the service and what the key components of that new service or intervention might be. You then mentioned about the testing being very, very important. So don't just go to market, test it first, and keep testing it until you're happy and your customers are happy that it's got the chance of being an initial success. But then after that stage, what comes next in terms of the next part of the whole process?
Well, I just want to pick up on that point about the how might we, because and just before I answer that second part of the question, I think it's that what you just said there is the reframing of a problem as a challenge is a really key part of designing a better service. So together in a collaborative way, we can really understand the challenges. We can develop, different stories, understand the journey that end users are going on, but then reframing those challenges as an opportunity, the how might we question is really key, because it gets people to think in a different way. It helps people who are part of the design process look at it from the lens through a different perspective. And then, as you say, once you've then worked together through that how might we do something differently phase of the design process, you can then start to prototype and start to test out a new idea in a small way to begin with, and learn from that and iterate. So that iterative process is really key to making those small incremental improvements in what you're trying to deliver. And then I think, it goes full circle. So as you know, through the Golf in Society reimagining of the golf clubs, we've done a 12-week pilot. We've learnt from that. We've then got further feedback from the service providers involved in delivering the service, as well as end users. And we can say some of the changes we implemented worked really well, but we've still got a challenge around recruitment or referrals into that service. So let's go back and get more people, and let's have maybe a sub-working group looking at that. And so the design process never ends. It's not a case of, okay, we've done this, we've got a blueprint for how this service works. It's an ongoing, iterative, design is ever changing, because you're constantly responding to the needs of the people that are using the service and learning all the time.
I just want to touch a little bit, Katheryn, on the challenges and barriers to overcome. Us working in that healthy aging space, we want to make the lives, those happy, healthy lives of our aging population so much better in years to come. And all of our social missions, our visions are all about achieving that. So, the values, the ethos is all about making these people's lives better. We have to engage a lot with stakeholders working in very traditional organizations that are very, very large, highly complex networks, often facing their own challenges, whether that be workforce capacity, whether that be budget constraints, and basically just the amount of time that they've got to actually get to the families that they want to support. So we've got families desperate for support. We've got social entrepreneurs coming up with these innovative solutions to show a new way as to how we might solve a lot of these long-lasting and ever-growing problems. And then we've got traditional stakeholders that possibly are so busy with the day-to-day work of just firefighting that when you get all of those particular individuals together in a room, it can be, I would imagine, quite challenging to find consensus. And just a couple of tips on how you address that.
Yeah, it's, creating that culture of success is really challenging, like you say, when organizations and key stakeholders in the process have other objectives. It's about, I guess, demonstrating the value to them of the co-design process so that they can see that not only are end users improving their health and well-being as a result of this service design process, but we're also saving money in the system. We're also helping to be more efficient. So if we can communicate those other benefits to other stakeholders of this process, that is half the battle. And it gets people on the same page. And I think there's something about shared values as well. It's about help. If there's a shared goal, a big goal that everyone's working towards, that can really, really help. So I think leadership, when you're working collaboratively with stakeholders, leadership is definitely needed to encourage that innovation process. It's about building skills and capabilities, and getting permission for experimentation and learning, because quite often the co-design process does take time, that iterative process that I described. There's a lot of pressure in terms of getting services out there, making changes quickly, and therefore there are shortcuts and not always the best changes are made. So strong leadership is needed to allow that learning process to happen. And I think engagement is needed as well with people who are delivering the services and the ideas, also with other partners who might have ideas. So as much as it's important to involve end users in the process of co-designing a service, it's equally important to get buy-in from leaders that are involved in the whole system.
Yeah, and I think that's really important because we're all in this together. We're all trying to achieve the same things. We're just coming at it in different ways from different backgrounds, some with innovative solutions, some with traditional frameworks that still, in terms of making sure that everything is done in a well-governed way, need to be in place.
Yeah.
And, but the bottom line, and I think this is what brings people together, is that we all have a common goal, and that is that the people in the room who we're trying to help are at the heart of what we're doing. We just have different starting points as to how we're going to make their lives better and make their futures happier. So I think getting that sort of consensus around that we are in it together, and we're not just deciding to criticize, deciding to take a cheap shot at certain people, which is easy to do, and understanding that they're human beings, they've got families, they've got elderly relatives, and we are all in this together. And it'll only get better if we do actually work on the solution together. And I think that is, for me, that is the most important thing when you bring all the stakeholders together, is just saying, hey, we're all in this together. We will not achieve it if we don't have you alongside and on board in helping this become a reality.
And I think as well as having that shared goal, which is really important, perhaps try to have a shared set of principles as well for designing better services. My work with the Design Council, they have some key design principles for all of the projects that we work on. I think there's 4. I think it's about, the first one is about putting people first. So, starting with an understanding of people that are using the service, their needs and their aspirations. I think the second one is about communicating visually and being inclusive in the way that you communicate. So, helping people gain a shared understanding of the problem that you're trying to solve and the ideas. The third one is around collaboration, working together, like you say, to get, we're all in this together. So let's get together around this goal, get inspired by what ideas are coming from all different directions. And then the fourth one being that iterative process. So if you can get stakeholders who are involved in improving health and care for all, to buy into that goal and to also buy into the principles, that really, really helps.
Fantastic. And I think that's a great way to just end that first section of our podcast. So onto the reimagining of golf clubs as health hubs. I have to say, Katheryn, when I took on this particular idea, people thought I was crazy. They thought I was absolutely mad. How on earth are you going to give people living with dementia and frailty and their carers access to golf clubs and deliver a holistic health and well-being program at their local golf club? Because ultimately, most of these people would have been expecting that type of help, support, or service in either a clinical environment or a GP surgery or one of those types of environment, but never at a golf club. So I suppose I like taking on big challenges, and this was probably the biggest we've ever taken on. But I have to say that working with you and working with the fellow stakeholders has been one of the most inspirational parts of my life, really, because taking on that big challenge and then being in a position where you get 42 health and social care stakeholders from the Sheffield landscape in a room. You get carers, you get people living with a diagnosis in a room, you get research teams in a room, you get allied health professionals, occupational therapists and physios in a room together. And you basically start by introducing what you want to do. And then you start by getting everyone's perspective, insight, feedback. And then taking all of that, which I have to say at times was quite challenging to take, because a lot of the feedback you get is very critical, and you've got to sort of be able as a leader, as an entrepreneur, to sort of absorb that and channel that into the area that, okay, that's a challenge. So how do we make that better? So you do all of that, and then you test your idea, and then you start recruiting your first beneficiaries into a new service that potentially can transform their lives. Then you deliver it, and then you evaluate it, and then you look back and you think what you've achieved in just 12 months. It's been, as I say, one of the most inspirational projects I've ever been involved in. But the service design part of it is one of the things I've enjoyed the most, because right along the way, we've had everybody involved in all parts of the process. And basically, I remember back on day one when we sat in Sheffield with all those health and social care stakeholders, and I remember Carey addressing the audience, a carer living with a loved one with dementia and an elderly mum, all in the same house, and she's the primary carer for both of them. And to be honest, Katheryn, there wasn't a dry eye in the room when Carey finished telling the audience what life is like at the coalface. And that, to me, was a pivotal moment in the whole process of getting everybody from all different backgrounds engaged in making this project a success.
Yeah, it was really, really powerful. And to have Carey there for all the stakeholders to ask questions after she spoke, to hear her experience, and to get everyone to think about the service from her perspective is, that's the most powerful part of service design. And like you say, we've brought people on that journey since that first session. It wasn't just Carey. You also interviewed other beneficiaries, people that you'd worked with, that have, unfortunately had experiences of frailty and dementia, and just understanding that their day-to-day lives really helped, I think, understand how to reimagine the golf clubs as health hubs for your program.
Yeah, and another thing from my perspective, which was really, really important, was to start talking different languages. Because to actually get all of the health and social care stakeholders on board, I needed to start talking about golf in a completely different language. I needed to talk about balance. I needed to talk about grip strength. I needed to talk about cognitive function. I needed to talk about emotional well-being. I needed to talk about coaching, sense of purpose, reason to get out of bed on a morning, and all of these things happening in the service we were about to design. And that to me was really, really important, because if I just talked about hitting a golf ball, that to a lot of people working in health and social care doesn't really mean that much if you don't understand golf and the importance of what a golf shot can bring, and what the importance of a golf venue can bring to families desperate for new friends, new opportunities, new reasons to get up on a morning and enjoy life. So I had to really think hard about that. I think that was pretty pivotal. So I think that we often need to reimagine the language we speak, not just the services that we're designing, to make sure that we bring the stakeholders on board. And I think that was a real key learning for me.
Definitely. And just in that first session, we also brought stakeholders together to map pathways for people and their carers affected by frailty and dementia. And in those pathways, we looked at what happens in someone's day-to-day life and the journey that go on. But we also brought in the emotions to that, didn't we? We looked at, how touch points with various different health and social care providers made people feel, if they had to, for example, the length of time between receiving an appointment for an assessment is a lot. There's a big waiting list, and how the anxiety, not just of the person, who is perhaps suffering with dementia, but for the carers, is through the roof. So it really helps to understand where the gaps are, the gaps were for services like Golf in Society, to help people and their carers during that waiting time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose a key reflection for me would be that we probably in future will engage more potential beneficiaries earlier in the design process, so bring even more of that cohort into those initial conversations about mapping out the experiences, what everyday life is like at the moment, and then sort of layering on that in terms of, what is their current access to GP appointments, to memory clinics, waiting times, what sort of occupational therapy support do they get, what support do they get around understanding their benefit entitlements, and, and all of those types of things that, what's their transportation requirements? Can they get around easily? All those types of things. When we do something similar in the future, we will definitely make sure we get more of that upfront input, because I think it helps further down the line. The more you get in those sort of sessions where you're mapping out their experiences in everyday life.
And as a design facilitator in that process, we were able to ask all those really obvious questions. How do you get to appointments? What are the barriers to you accessing these services? And how do those services and experiences make you feel? We were able to capture all of that and then come back with a kind of, okay, here are the challenges that we've identified. Here are the opportunities for improvement. Let's now move on to the next stage around my favorite bit of the design process, which is idea generation, working together to look at, okay, well, if that's a problem, what things would make you feel better during that, so yes, it'd be great to involve more end users from the beginning. But you were able to interview lots of people to get those personas. Stakeholders were they able to then use those personas to check in their ideas with, would this work for John? Would this work for Mary? Those kind of personas based on real people's experiences are super helpful for other stakeholders helping in that co-design process.
I have to say that going on to the process from service design to service delivery, it was I was quite was quite nervous and apprehensive, actually, because when the first groups of beneficiaries that you've recruited for this program, which, just to remind the audience, it's basically a 12-week program where we basically measured the health, the health and well-being of participants in week 1. We then did interim measurements in week 6, and then final health assessments after 12 weeks. And that was all done with our research partners, the Advanced Wellbeing Research Centre and the Sport Industry Research Centre in Sheffield. So that was what people were signing up for when they joined our 12-week program. I was quite nervous when that first cohort arrived at Hillsborough Golf Club on that first day, but to see the smiles, to see the laughter, to see the apprehension and nervousness amongst the beneficiaries almost drain away, and the enjoyment levels and laughter and conversations start to improve as they became comfortable with the environment and they became comfortable with the people around them and realized that this was a good place to be. This was a nice place to be. And this is something they're probably going to enjoy. That to me was a really, really important moment in the whole process.
Yeah, because you obviously, Golf in Society as a service has been running for quite some years. And but this was a new version of your service delivery. So you're obviously working with partners. You are offering lots of different physio, occupational therapy opportunities, and delivering it in a slightly different way with a new cohort. And the research element was obviously quite important. So there was lots of different feedback loops, wasn't there, with the new service that you delivered, which was really important from the point of view of evaluating the outcomes of those beneficiaries, but also to know that you're doing things right. So you've had ideas in that first part of the service design process, and then actually doing it for real, you can kind of think, okay, is this working? And some parts, I guess, worked really, really well, and you had amazing feedback. And others, perhaps you think, okay, we can do that better next time.
Totally. I'm going to ask you a difficult question here. What has been the most enjoyable part of working on this project with us for you?
I think going back to that, what you said about that very first session when we brought together all the key stakeholders, and Kerry spoke about her experience of being a carer for her husband with dementia, and how Golf in Society, just seeing the impact on her life of being involved with Golf in Society, that just did it for me. I know that there's a real need out there for this service. And so, the rest of it's easy. And you kind of bringing people, you can see the need, and you can see the opportunity for an improvement in what you've already got. That's really going to make a difference on people's lives and have a positive impact. So to then see you run through the program with the changes as a result of that co-design process, that's been really, it's been really great just to see the outcomes. You're making a difference.
No, that's fantastic. And I suppose one final reflection for me is that, when I first started Golf in Society, I didn't have a clue about occupational therapy. I didn't even understand what it meant. But now we would never do anything without occupational therapy, physiotherapy, professional golf coaching, all built in to our service that we deliver, because it allows us to make sure that we do what we say on the tin, is we can be person-centered, is that we can make a difference to people's lives, that we can be deep and meaningful, and we can be long-lasting with the impact that we have. And without those key delivery partners, and collaborators on making our social mission a reality and this service such a success, then it just wouldn't happen. So the key learning for me has been get the right partners around you, the right
Yeah,
people with shared values who are willing to collaborate and are prepared to go on that sort of, that innovation journey with you. And the outcome, when it all comes to bear at the end of the process, is long enduring relationships. And that, as a social entrepreneur, is really, really important to me because I realize I cannot do it alone. But with fellow social entrepreneurs, with fellow health and social care stakeholders working in this space, together we've got such a lot to offer and such a lot to bring. And the power of that togetherness is not just infectious. I think it's the only way we'll solve some of these major challenges facing our healthy aging population. And if nothing else, this project for me has shown that power of collaboration.
absolutely. And I think golf clubs are a great environment for people to collaborate in. What you set out to achieve about reimagining golf clubs as healthy aging hubs for families with the challenges of dementia is a really great mission. And by different stakeholders working together in those environments, which are community-based environments, not clinical environments, it takes the stigma away from having dementia. You can see it when the carers speak about how empowering it is to have that routine, to have a place to go, to have a community that gives them a break, but also allows their loved ones to get the support, the physical, physio and therapy support that they need, is really inspiring. So, and I think, the clinical health side of things, working together with the social sector is really, really important.
Yeah, totally. And I suppose really the final thing on this project for me is that I can't wait to share with the audience the final research outcomes, which will be available probably late Feb, early March, because the initial feedback from the evaluations in terms of the health and wellbeing improvements of not just the people who were diagnosed and joined the service, but also their unpaid carers, I think is very compelling. And I'm so pleased that what we set out to do a year ago has actually gone through the whole process of being delivered. And many of the impacts that we wanted to see, we know now through the evaluations we've actually achieved. And I don't think there's anything more rewarding than that, to know that you've made a difference to all those people's lives through something you set out with just a few people in a room, a piece of paper, a vision, an idea, and you've actually made it a reality and changed their lives.
Yeah.
The biggest question we had in December is that, and it was a little bit of a criticism, I suppose, of saying, when we hope this program doesn't end. So for people who've been through the service to not want it to end, I don't think you can get a better endorsement of what you've done than that, really.
That's fantastic. And what the service design process has enabled is you now have a blueprint for how you can scale out the service design, the Golf in Society program to other venues around the country, and all stakeholders who are involved in delivering that service to end users know exactly what their role and responsibilities are. And I think that's, visualizing the whole system really helps, because you can kind of, it's stake in the ground to say, this is how we deliver this service. Obviously, going back to what I said earlier about it never really ends, because you're always learning and you're always tweaking and changing and making improvements based on feedback. But you do have that blueprint for business as usual now.
And that's fantastic. And that's a brilliant legacy for you to leave us with, Katheryn. So,
it's been amazing.
So onto the final part of our little chat today, and I'd just like you to just spend a little moment talking about the future of co-design, but most importantly for entrepreneurs like myself, and especially those maybe just starting out on their social mission, some little top tips in terms of the importance of service design and sort of what to involve and how to go about it.
I think I probably touched on this earlier, but it's just really, really important to think of the service design process as something that requires participation all the way through. So it's not just about consultation, let's go and find out how our end users are experiencing this particular service, and then we'll take their feedback and we'll go away and we'll make improvements. Whilst that's really honourable, it doesn't always, what people say their experience doesn't always translate into how they actually experience something. So I think involvement, observation, participation is a really key. If you are able to keep people involved in the design process, that's really valuable. And the other thing is just going back to looking at what the stakeholders need, having that shared goal that everyone's working towards. So, coming up with why are we doing this? Well, ultimately, we want to create better, more inclusive health and social care services that are going to, not only improve lives, but also save money and be more efficient in the system. So if you can get stakeholders to buy into that shared goal and keep referencing that, hold on to that as part of your evaluation, I think that's really important too.
That's fantastic. And my sort of final sort of reflection on why I love service design, now I understand what it's all about so much, is I love immersing myself as far as I can. And I know that you can't always immerse yourself totally in your customers' lives, but I love immersing myself as much as I can in terms of the challenges that they're going through and putting them right at the center of everything we do. And then building out from that in terms of what that opportunity to improve their lives looks like. And only by doing that can we keep, as you always say, Katheryn, keep being iterative and keep evolving to make sure that we're always relevant. We're always evolving as these challenges evolve and making sure that they get the most out of the services that we design and then provide. So that to me is the most rewarding thing about it is knowing you've immersed yourself in their lives, really listened and understood. And I mean, really listened. Yeah. Sometimes we're not always good at listening. And then basically say, you know what, how might we just change that? And I think for the audience, one thing that's stuck with me is one little story about going to a memory clinic appointment in Sheffield, and basically two people trying to get through and navigate Northern General Hospital with all the car parks, with all the different wards, a carer with a loved one with mixed dementia in the car, into that appointment for their memory clinic assessment. And I just thought to myself, if I was in their shoes, what would that look like, from getting up on a morning to getting to that appointment to getting home safely? And honestly, it blew me away in terms of the complexity of it, because of the complexity of the environment, complexity of the challenges that their loved one was facing in terms of their comprehension as to why they were at hospital. And that really just makes you realize that the easier we can make it for these families to sort of access support, access the services in beautiful green spaces, at beautiful golf clubs, with free parking, which always goes down very well, with everything there ready for them, rather than them having to do all the hard work and navigate some very challenging environments to actually get to these appointments. That, I suppose, really it's something that really stuck with me out of this project when I put myself into those people's shoes, really. And that
Yeah.
and that really sort of brought it to life in terms of why we're doing what we do.
That's right. I think the best service designers are the ones that really listen, like you say, and also walk in the shoes of the people that you're trying to design the service for. So, by watching, observing, going with them, we call it a service safari, where we actually, follow their journey, and understand the nuances, the details, the complexities of the things that they're navigating, so that you can overcome them in the things that the services the different options and ways that they can interact with your service.
Absolutely, Katheryn. Absolutely. And that's a great way to end our conversation together today. For me, it's been an absolute privilege and a pleasure. It's been a very rewarding, enlightening, and enjoyable journey that we've been on. I'm so pleased that we got you on board as our service design experts from day one, because you've been a pleasure to work with. And I'm sure that the audience today have got much more of an insight into the importance of service design. A couple of real life examples of how you've worked with us on reimagining golf clubs. And hopefully they'll start to now embed service design and co-design in particular into everything they do as they embark on their social missions. So
Oh, it's been
thanks.
an absolute pleasure to be involved, Anthony. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. All the best.